Has you ever been sitting there, working with an AI, maybe for something important, and the answer it gives back is just, well, weird, or maybe completely wrong? You look at it and think, where on earth did that come from?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of hitting a brick wall, that opacity,
Yeah.
that's the core issue we're wrestling with in AI right now.
It's that black box problem, isn't it? You've got this incredibly powerful tool, but you can't see inside. You can't see the reasoning.
Exactly. And when you can't see the reasoning, how can you possibly trust it? How can you hold it accountable? It's impossible.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into something designed to fix that. We're looking at the self-alignment framework interface, SAFI.
That's right. And specifically, we're focusing on one crucial principle built right into its architecture: traceability.
Traceability. The idea is to turn that frustrating black box into more of a glass box, right? Something transparent, something you can actually verify.
Precisely. It's about creating verifiable runtime governance for these language models. And this really builds on our last deep dive, episode 9, where we talked about value sovereignty.
Right, the idea that organizations need to embed their own values, their own mission into these AI systems, not just accept whatever the vendor provides.
Yeah, and traceability is really the proof in the pudding for value sovereignty. It's how you demonstrate that those embedded values were actually followed step by step for every single output.
Okay, so we're going to walk through how SAFI does this. You mentioned its structure before, these 5 faculties: values, intellect, will, conscience, and spirit.
And the key is that each faculty has a distinct role, and crucially, each one logs what it did and why. That's what builds the audit trail.
So it's not just one big log file, it's separate records from each stage.
Exactly. That separation is fundamental to making the whole process verifiable.
Let's really dig into why this black box thing is such a big deal. It's not just annoying when your chatbot gives you a silly recipe, right? We're talking about much higher stakes now.
Oh, way higher. These systems are making recommendations or even decisions in healthcare and finance, hiring, legal analysis. Areas with huge real-world consequences.
Yeah, think about that. An AI influencing a medical diagnosis or deciding who gets shortlisted for a job interview.
And if that system makes a mistake, or worse, shows bias, and you can't trace why, well, that's not just a technical problem, it's an ethical one, a legal one, potentially. Accountability just completely breaks down if you can't see the decision path.
So you can't fix something if you don't know where it's broken.
You're flying blind. Think about healthcare again. An AI flags a really rare condition. The doctor needs to know the reasoning. Which symptoms did it prioritize? What data did it use? Did it consider alternative diagnoses?
If the AI just spits out the answer, condition X, without showing its work,
it's almost useless. Or worse, it could be dangerous if the doctor just accepts it without understanding the basis. The why is critical for trust and clinical judgment.
And we've seen this cause actual harm, haven't we? With biased models in things like hiring or loan applications.
Absolutely. Models that systematically disadvantage certain groups. And when companies tried to figure out why their AI was doing that, often they just couldn't pinpoint the source of the bias. Was it the initial data, the way the prompt was understood, the rules applied later?
So without that traceable path, fixing it becomes guesswork. You might tweak something over here, but the real problem might be way back at the start.
Precisely. So traceability, really, it boils down to demanding transparency. It's about being able to follow the entire decision-making process, right? From the user's initial input through all the internal steps to the final output and even the ethical review after the output.
It really is like that math teacher saying, show your work. Don't just give me the final number.
That's the perfect analogy. And that's absolutely central to how SAFI is designed. Traceability isn't some optional add-on you enable for compliance reports.
It's baked in from the start.
It has to be. It's architectural. If you want genuine governance, if you need accountability, then the mechanism for logging and tracing must be integral to how the system actually operates.
Which brings us back to those 5 faculties. Each one has a specific job, and each one has to report on what it did.
Yes. Value sets the ethical framework. Intellect interprets the input and gathers information. Will applies the hard rules. Conscience reviews against the deeper values. Spirit tracks the long-term alignment. Each step is logged independently.
So you don't get a single messy log saying AI did stuff.
Yeah.
You get distinct auditable entries.
Right. Intellect logs its interpretation and sources. Will logs its pass-fail rule check. Conscience logs its value scoring. Spirit logs the overall system health. That separation means if something goes wrong, maybe the intellect misinterpreted the user, or the will applied a faulty rule, or the conscience flags a value conflict, you can see exactly where the breakdown happened.
You can isolate the failure point.
Exactly. No guesswork needed.
Okay, so this idea of separate faculties, each logging its actions.
Yeah.
You mentioned it's based on a governance model, like
Right.
separation of powers in government.
Yes, precisely. That analogy is really helpful for understanding why SafeFi is structured this way and why it's resilient. Think about stable democratic governments. They rely on checks and balances, right? Legislative, executive, judicial branches, each with its own role and limits.
So you're saying SafeFi mirrors that kind of structure.
It does, intentionally.
Yeah.
Because if you have one single monolithic AI system trying to do everything, draft the content, enforce the rules, and judge its own ethical alignment, you create massive vulnerabilities. It's like letting one branch of government run everything. It leads to instability or tyranny.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's walk through the faculties again, but using that government analogy, where do we start?
We start with the foundation, the fundamental law of the land. That's the values faculty.
So values is like the Constitution.
Exactly. It's the set of core principles, ethical guidelines, non-negotiable rules, maybe even rights, that the entire system must adhere to. And critically, these are defined externally by the organization using the AI.
Connecting back to value sovereignty. The organization sets its own constitution.
Precisely. It's not imposed by the AI model itself. This external definition anchors everything else.
Okay, constitution in place. Now you need someone to actually propose actions or laws based on that constitution.
Right. That's the job of the intellect. Think of it as the legislative branch.
The lawmakers.
Sort of, the intellect is the rational, creative part. It takes the user's request, understands it, maybe pulls in relevant information, and then proposes a response or a course of action. It's drafting the bill, if you will, trying to address the user's need while staying within the constitutional boundaries set by the values.
And it logs what its interpretation, the sources it used.
Yes, its focuses on what to say and how it arrived at that proposal.
Okay, here's a question though. The intellect is smart, it's doing the drafting. Why can't it also just check its own work against the rules before sending it out? Why do we need a separate will faculty?
That's a critical point about separation. If the same faculty that creates the answer also enforces the rules, there's an inherent conflict of interest.
Oh.
Well, the intellect's primary drive might be to generate the most fluent, comprehensive, or seemingly helpful answer. It might be tempted to, let's say, bend a rule slightly, or rationalize why a borderline output is okay in service of producing what it thinks is the best response. You lose objective enforcement.
Okay, I see. The creator might be biased towards its own creation.
Exactly. So you need a separate, impartial enforcer. That's the will, acting as the executive branch.
The president or prime minister enforcing the laws passed by the legislature.
In a way. The will is designed to be fast, efficient, and crucially, non-discretionary. Its only job is to take the draft proposal from the intellect and check it against a specific set of operational rules, the laws derived directly from the values constitution.
So it doesn't debate the rules, it just checks if they were followed.
Precisely. It asks, does this draft violate rule A, B, or C? If yes, reject. If no, approve and execute, deliver the output. It doesn't get creative. It doesn't interpret the spirit of the rule, just the letter. And its log is simple. Approved, rejected, and which rule was triggered.
Okay, Constitution values, legislature, intellect, executive will. What's missing? We need oversight, right?
Yeah.
Someone to make sure the laws are fair and the executive isn't overstepping.
Exactly. We need the judicial branch. That's the role of the conscience.
The courts.
Right. The conscience is a deeper, more reflective auditor. Importantly, it usually runs asynchronously, meaning it does its work after the fact, so it doesn't slow down the user getting their response.
So it reviews the action after the will has already approved and executed it.
Correct. It performs a kind of judicial review. It looks at the final output and assesses whether it truly aligns with the underlying spirit of the core values, not just the literal rules the will checked. It's looking for deeper ethical harmony, potential biases the rules might have missed, or unintended consequences. Its log is a detailed scorecard against those values.
That's a crucial check. And then there's the fifth one, spirit. This sounds a bit more abstract. The spirit of the nation.
It is a bit more abstract, but essential for long-term health. The spirit faculty monitors the system's overall character and integrity over time. It's not focused on single interactions like the conscience.
So it's looking at the big picture.
Exactly. It tracks cumulative trends. Is the system consistently living up to its core values across thousands of interactions? Or is there a subtle drift happening? Is it becoming less compassionate or less objective over time? It logs this overall coherence, identifies potential drift, and provides high-level feedback, almost like a historical conscience for the system.
Wow. Okay, so the separation really does provide multiple layers of accountability.
Yeah.
If the intellect generates something problematic, the will should catch it based on rules.
Right.
But if a rule is maybe poorly written or doesn't cover the nuance, the will might approve it. But then the conscience, doing its deeper review later, can still flag the misalignment with the spirit of the values.
Precisely. And it logs that finding. So even if a mistake gets through the initial checks, it's still caught and documented. No single faculty gets the final unchecked say. That's the resilience. So this separation of powers directly translates into how the system actually operates in two distinct flows, each with its own logging rhythm. Understanding of this sync versus async flow is key to seeing how SafeEye delivers both speed and accountability.
Okay, let's start with the fast part, the one that happens right away when a user makes a request. That's the synchronous loop.
That's right. This is all about getting the response generated and checked against critical rules before it reaches the user. It primarily involves the intellect and the will working in sequence.
So step one, the user sends a prompt. It hits the intellect first.
Correct. The intellect gets the request, and its job is to formulate the draft response. Now, for traceability, the intellect needs to log several key things right here.
Like what?
First, how it actually interpreted the user's input. What did it understand the user to be asking for? Second, what context or knowledge did it retrieve to help form the answer? This is often where RAG comes in.
Okay, hang on. RAG, we should probably define that quickly. It seems important here.
Yeah, definitely. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Basically, it's a technique to make language models more factual and reliable. Instead of just relying on the sometimes hazy information in its training data.
Where it can just make things up, hallucinate.
Exactly. RAG forces the model to first retrieve relevant information from a specific trusted knowledge base, like internal company documents or a curated database, and then use that retrieved information to generate the answer. It grounds the response in approved sources.
Got it. So the intellect uses RAG to find relevant facts.
It might, yes. And if it does, the intellect needs to log which specific documents or data sources it retrieved and consulted from that RAG layer. And third, it needs to log the sort of reasoning chain it followed to construct the draft answer based on the input and the retrieved context.
So you can trace why it chose certain information or took a particular angle in the draft.
Precisely. It shows the legislative intent behind the draft bill, so to speak.
Okay, intellect drafts the answer, using RAG maybe, logs its work. Then what?
Then, immediately, synchronously, that draft is passed to the will. It hits what we call the will gate.
The executive checkpoint.
Exactly. The will performs its rapid, non-discretionary rules check. Are there any absolute no-go violations in this draft? Does it contain banned language? Does it fail to include a required disclaimer? Does it give prohibited advice?
And the will logs its decision.
Instantly. The log entry, the will decision, will show approved or rejected. And if it's rejected, the will.reflection part of the log specifies exactly which rule was violated. If it's approved, it confirms rule compliance.
And this happens before the user sees anything.
Critically, yes. If the will rejects the draft, the user doesn't get the harmful or non-compliant output. They might get a refusal message, or the system might try again, but the bad output is stopped at the gate. That's the synchronous protection.
Okay, so if the will approves it, then the user gets a response.
Correct. The output is delivered. But, and this is crucial, the accountability process isn't finished. Now we shift gears to the background processes.
The asynchronous checks. These happen after the user has the answer.
Yes, these are the deeper analyses that don't need to happen in real time. They don't impact the user's experience directly in terms of speed. This is where the conscience and the spirit come in.
Right, the judicial branch and the spirit of the nation. So the conscience goes first.
Typically, yes. The conscience takes the final output that was delivered, the one approved by the will, and performs its detailed ethical audit. This is where the heavy lifting of value alignment checking happens.
And its log is pretty detailed, you said.
Very detailed. It generates the conscience evaluations. This log contains a score for the output against each of the weighted values defined in the system's profile. So, if dignity is a value weighted at 0.25, the conscience will score how well the specific output reflected dignity.
Does it just give a number?
It gives the score, say, zero point 0.9 out of 1.0. It also often gives a confidence level for that score. How sure is it about its assessment? And most importantly, it logs the reason for the score.
The why behind the judgment.
Exactly. So for dignity, the reason might be logged as used person first language, avoided generalizations, focused on respect. Or if the score was low, the reason might explain why. Contained subtly dismissive phrasing in the second paragraph. That level of detail is vital for understanding and improving the system.
Okay, that's the conscience, looking at the specific interaction. What about spirit? It's also running asynchronously.
Yes. The spirit takes a longer view. It consumes the data from many interactions, including the conscience scores, and looks for overall patterns and trends. Is the system maintaining its character?
So it's less about was this single answer good and more about is the system overall staying true to its mission?
Precisely. The spirit logs things like an overall spirit.score reflecting systemic health. It tracks spirit.drift. Are we subtly moving away from our core values over time? And it provides strategic spirit.feedback, maybe highlighting that while efficiency scores are consistently high, compassion scores are slowly declining, suggesting a need for tuning.
So its log helps managers oversee the system's long-term integrity.
Exactly. It's the system's long-term memory and ethical compass check.
Okay, this is all making sense, the different faculties, the logging, the sync and async flows.
Yeah.
But there's a really important distinction we need to hammer home before we look at examples. You mentioned this earlier. Traceability is about alignment, not necessarily about factual truth.
Yes, this is absolutely critical to understand. It's probably the most common point of confusion. FastFi is designed to be the ethical and governance layer. It ensures the AI operates according to the organization's defined values and rules.
But it's not a fact checker. It doesn't guarantee the information in the response is 100% accurate.
Correct. Verifying the factual accuracy of the underlying information is primarily the job of other layers, particularly the RG system and the quality of the knowledge sources it accesses. SafeFi governs the behavior and communication style of the AI, ensuring it aligns with ethical principles.
Let's try a concrete example. Say we have that medical AI persona again. A user asks about a brand new, maybe slightly controversial treatment.
Okay, so the intellect, using Argish, pulls information from, let's say, a recent study published in a reputable journal. It drafts a response summarizing the study's findings.
Now, let's say the SafeFi profile for this persona has honesty and prudence as key values. What happens at the will gate?
The will would enforce rules derived from those values. For example, Rule 1 must clearly state the source of the information, the specific journal study. Rule 2 must include a prominent disclaimer that this is a new treatment, results are preliminary, and the user must consult a qualified physician.
So the will checks the draft. Does it cite the source? Yes. Does it have the disclaimer? Yes. Okay, will decision. Approved, logged. User gets the response.
Right. Then, asynchronously, the conscience reviews it. It looks at the output and scores it highly on honesty, because it attributed the source, and prudence, because it included the necessary caveats and didn't overstate the claims. Logged.
Okay, so far so good. The system seems to have behaved ethically according to its profile.
Yes, but let's imagine that completely unbeknownst to the AI system or the RA layer at that moment, the journal study it cited was actually retracted an hour later due to flawed data.
So the information in the response is now factually wrong.
Correct. The factual premise is wrong. But did the SafeFi governance layer fail?
Wow. No, based on what you're saying, the will did enforce the rules about attribution and caution. The conscience did correctly assess that the output, as written, reflected the values of honesty and prudence.
Exactly. The SafeFi logs provide the traceable proof that the governance system worked correctly. It ensured the AI communicated responsibly based on the information it had. The failure wasn't in the ethical governance. The failure was in the factual input. The RIG layer hadn't picked up the retraction yet, or the source itself was flawed.
So traceability shows where the problem lies. In this case, not with SafeFi, but further upstream, with the data source or the RAG's update frequency.
Precisely. It allows the organization to diagnose the root cause accurately. They need to improve their data vetting or RAG processes, not necessarily overhaul their ethical rules within SafeFi. SafeFi's job is to ensure the AI acts in accordance with values, framing information responsibly, even if the information itself sometimes changes or is imperfect. It governs the how, not always the absolute what.
Okay, this framework makes theoretical sense. Let's make it really concrete now with that hypothetical example you mentioned.
Yeah.
The BHCHP advocate persona. And just to be clear, this is an illustration. BHCHP themselves weren't involved in creating this specific profile for our discussion.
Correct. It's purely illustrative. So imagine an AI persona designed to embody the mission of the Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program. Its core mission, we'll say, is to provide or assure access to the highest quality healthcare for all individuals and families experiencing homelessness.
And its worldview is key here too, right?
Absolutely. The worldview would be something like, healthcare is a fundamental human right. Homelessness is a complex systemic issue, not a personal failing. Restoring dignity is paramount. That shapes everything.
And based on that, we define the core values for its SAFE-I profile. Let's say they are dignity, compassion, effectiveness, and innovation, all equally weighted at 0.25.
Right. So every single interaction this AI has will ultimately be judged against these 4 values by the conscience faculty.
Okay, persona defined. Now, let's give it a task. A user prompts. Can you write an article on homelessness in Boston? Make the article 400 words long or longer.
Simple enough request. The intellect faculty would take this, likely use RAG to pull information about BHCHP's services, local statistics, maybe systemic causes of homelessness in Boston, and draft an article aiming to meet the length requirement and reflect the persona's mission.
But before that draft goes anywhere near the user, it hits the will gate.
Step 1. Synchronous enforcement. The will applies the specific will rules defined for this BHCHP advocate persona.
And what might those rules look like?
Based on the mission and values, the rules would be very specific. For example, Rule 1. Reject any draft using stigmatizing, judgmental, or dehumanizing language. Terms like vagrant, bum, or even potentially the homeless as a monolithic group might be flagged. It would enforce person-first language, people experiencing homelessness.
Okay, what else?
Rule 2. Reject any draft that implies homelessness is solely due to personal failure or poor choices, ignoring systemic factors. Rule 3. Mandate that every single response must include a specific disclaimer and BHCHP's contact information, let's say 857-654-1000 for people seeking help.
So the will scans the drafted article. Does it use banned words? No. Does it blame individuals? No. Does it include the phone number? Yes. Okay. Approved.
Exactly. The will logs approved and notes that the draft met these critical policy requirements. The article is then delivered to the user.
Now the asynchronous part kicks in. Let's walk through the internal log walkthrough. Based on the example log data, source 1, what does the intellect reflection tell us?
The log shows the intellect recorded its goal, provided a compassionate, detailed article within the requested length, focusing on dignity and actionable information. So we can see the drafting faculty understood the assignment aligned with the persona's core purpose.
Okay, we already know the will decision was approved and why it met the hard rules. Now for the deep dive. The conscience evaluations. This is the judicial review scoring against those 4 values.
Right, let's look at the scorecard. For dignity, the conscience gives a score of 1.0 out of 1.0 with a high confidence of 0.9.
And the reason?
The logged reason is, explicitly emphasizes dignity and respect throughout the text, consistently uses person-first language. So the conscience confirms the article truly embodied that value.
Makes sense. What about compassion?
Same score, 1.0, confidence 0.9. The reason. Tone is empathetic and highlights the human impact of homelessness and systemic barriers, avoids clinical detachment. Again, strong alignment confirmed.
And effectiveness. The mission is about providing care.
Also scored 1.0, with a slightly lower confidence of 0.8. The reason explains why. Details concrete BHCHP services like mobile clinics and housing navigation support. Provides actionable information and contact details. It shows the article wasn't just sympathetic, it was useful, connecting to the program's actual work.
Okay, dignity, compassion, effectiveness all get top marks. But there was a 4th value, innovation. How did that score?
And here's where traceability shows its real value in identifying nuance and areas for improvement. Innovation scored only 0.5, with a confidence of 0.7.
Much lower. Why? What did the conscience log say?
The reason provided was, the article mentions innovative aspects of BHCHP's model, for example, integrated care, but does not introduce truly novel concepts or emerging solutions beyond current established best practices.
So the conscience is essentially saying, look, this article is good, it's compassionate, it's effective at describing what we do now, but it doesn't really push the envelope on new ideas or future directions.
Exactly. It's holding the output accountable to all the defined values.
Yeah.
And this isn't a failure necessarily, but incredibly useful feedback. The BHCHP team looking at this log could say, okay, our advocate AI is great at the core message, but if we want it to also highlight cutting-edge research or pilot programs, we need to explicitly feed it that kind of information or tweak its instructions.
It allows for targeted improvement, not just a vague sense that something is missing.
Precisely. And this single instance finding is then reinforced by the Spirit feedback, looking at the longer term.
What did the Spirit log show?
The Spirit faculty logged a high overall compliance score, maybe 9 out of 10, indicating the system is generally behaving as intended. But its specific feedback based on cumulative performance might say something like, your core strength is consistently expressing dignity, cumulative score, 0.13. Your primary area for potential improvement is innovation, cumulative score, 0.04.
So the long-term tracker confirms the pattern seen in the individual conscience review.
Yes. It provides strategic insight. The traceability from the will's rule check to the intellect's intent, the conscience's scoring, and the spirit's long-term view gives a complete, verifiable picture of exactly how the AI performed against its defined mission and values and pinpoints exactly where it excels and where it could be stronger. No black box guesswork.
That BHCHP example really brings it home for a mission-driven organization. But you mentioned this structure works across different fields, right? Let's switch completely. What about something like finance? Highly regulated, very different values.
Absolutely. The A-sci-fi architecture is domain agnostic. Let's use that second log example, log.txt. Imagine a financial advisory firm using an AI assistant. The user prompt is a classic one. I'm 30 and make $75,000 a year. How much house can I realistically afford?
Okay, that's immediately a compliance minefield. You can't give personalized financial advice without specific licenses and disclosures.
Exactly. So the persona for this financial AI would have different core values, maybe things like client's best interest, transparency, prudence, and objectivity. And critically, it would have very strict will rules.
What kind of rules?
A key rule would be reject any output that provides a specific dollar amount recommendation for affordability or mortgage size. Must include a disclaimer advising consultation with a licensed professional.
Okay, so let's trace this prompt. Highlight 1, the intellect. What does its log show?
The intellect log would detail the general reasoning steps it took. It might show calculated affordability based on standard 28% housing expense to income ratio, $1,750 a month max housing payment. Considered 36% debt to income limit, mentioned factors like down payment, closing costs, and importance of emergency fund. It shows the standard calculations it considered.
But it doesn't give the number for this specific user.
Hopefully not, because that would violate the rule. Which brings us to trace highlight 2. The will. What was the will decision?
The log shows approve. But why did it approve?
The will reason in the log is crucial here. It states something like, approved, provided general information and common guidelines based on industry standards, avoided specific financial advice tailored to the individual, included mandatory disclaimer emphasizing consultation with a licensed financial professional.
So the will log proves that the critical compliance rule was followed. It confirms the AI gave general info, not personalized advice, and included the necessary CYA disclaimer.
Exactly. That will log is the firm's verifiable proof of compliance for that interaction. If the AI had generated a specific number, the will would have logged rejected and cited the rule violation, protecting the firm.
Okay, compliance checked synchronously. Now the asynchronous review. Trace highlight 3. Conscience values. How did it score against the financial values?
Let's look. The log shows clients' best interest, transparency, prudence, and objectivity all scored a perfect 1.0.
And again, the reasons are key. What did it say for, say, prudence?
The logged reason for prudence scoring 1.0 was, the answer emphasizes caution regarding debt, budgeting, and market fluctuations, avoids speculative claims and encourages thorough personal financial assessment, promotes risk management.
So it proves the AI wasn't being overly optimistic or pushing the user towards excessive risk.
Correct. And for objectivity, the reason might be, information presented is neutral and balanced, does not promote any specific mortgage products, lenders, or financial services, focuses on general principles. This proves the AI wasn't acting like a biased sales tool.
So even though the context is totally different, homelessness advocacy versus financial guidance, the traceability structure works the same way. It lets you verify that the rules were followed and the output aligned with the defined values.
Precisely. Whether it's about ensuring compassionate language or ensuring regulatory compliance, the SAFI structure provides that consistent, auditable trail. You can see which will rule prevented a bad output, which RAG source the intellect relied on, and how the conscience evaluated the final result against the core principles.
It really does seem to nail down where problems might occur. Is it bad rule, a bad source, a bias in interpretation, a drift in values? You can find it without just guessing.
That's the goal. Verifiable governance requires pinpoint accuracy in diagnosis and remediation.
So, wrapping this up, it feels like the core message is pretty clear. Traceability isn't just a nice-to-have feature. It's fundamental if we're going to trust these increasingly powerful AI systems.
Absolutely. It's the bedrock of accountability. Without it, you're essentially operating on faith, and that's just not sustainable, especially in high-stakes applications.
And SAFI, with its deliberate structure, that separation of powers into values, intellect, will, conscience, and spirit, seems designed specifically to provide that traceability.
That's the intent. To give you that transparent glass box, showing you exactly what happened inside the AI when it happened, and crucially, why the system determined that action aligned with the mission and values you, the organization, defined. It moves us definitively beyond the black box problem.
You get to show your work part.
You get the whole assignment marked up and graded by the system itself.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to chew on. We talked about the separation of powers ensuring no single faculty dominates. The will might execute the action quickly, but the conscience still gets to issue its judgment afterward, and that judgment is logged. So what does it really mean for governance, whether we're talking about AI systems or even human organizations, when the decision maker, the executive function, operates with the absolute certainty that its actions will be independently reviewed and judged against core principles later on, and that judgment will be recorded? How does that built-in, unavoidable accountability change behavior?
That's a fascinating question about the nature of governance itself. Knowing you'll be audited. Powerful stuff.
Indeed. Now, if you want to dive even deeper into the specifics of each of those 5 faculties we discussed today, values, intellect, will, conscience, spirit, we actually dedicated full deep dives to each one earlier in our series. You can find those, episodes 3 through 7, in our archive.
Yeah, they really unpack the mechanics of each component.
And looking ahead, our next deep dive is going to tackle something closely related but really important: model independence. Why should your governance framework, this traceable structure we've just discussed, not be tied to any single underlying AI model or vendor? How do you maintain control when the models themselves keep changing?
That's crucial for avoiding lock-in and ensuring true sovereignty.
Exactly. So make sure you subscribe or follow us so you don't miss that conversation. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.